At the heart of every paddler beats a passion for water, competition, and conservation. This unique podcast aims to unite all the paddling styles and stories under one common heartbeat. This is The Paddler's Pulse.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us again at The Paddler's Pulse. My name is Greggy, and today we're bringing to you, actually, time out. My real name is Greg, but somewhere along the lines it was outrigger. When I first started outrigger paddling, the nickname Greggy got assigned to me, and I guess it affectionately just stuck. So most people in the paddling communities refers to me as Greggy, and you can too, because you're like family if you're listening to this. So, Greggy, there you are. Today we bring to you something totally different, and this is something I'm really excited for the Paddler's Pulse to be doing more of for you guys, and that is more long-form content in like interviews and stuff like that. Interviews are great because we get a chance to sit down with people who are movers and shakers in the paddling world and learn juicy tidbits and great stories, rich history, and just like overall wisdom. So I'm stoked about that. So today we bring to you this cool cat out of San Diego named Chris Hill. And Chris has a background in outrigger paddling through coaching, but he's also done dragon boat and prone. He's done multiple Molokai crossings and several amazing kind of just long, like sufferfest water adventures. You're going to hear about those in the interview. But we think highly of Chris because years ago he started this kind of amazing workout thing for paddlers, and it's both water-based and land-based. You don't have to be a pro to do it, and it just brings people from all different levels and all different backgrounds and all different paddlecraft to just get better at paddling. And it's really community-based, and he's done a really great job of that, and we're very inspired by it. So we're going to talk to him in this episode. You're going to learn some fun stuff like why a paddler is like a Coke can, and what Chris means when he says it's important to learn to avoid the quit in training. We hashtag a lot in this episode, which is super weird because we don't normally do that. So it's kind of funny. And I dare you to not adjust your posture during or after this interview, because Chris is kind of a functional movement geek, and that's cool because he tells us some really great tips, including knowing the difference between a dead bug and a hollow rock and why they're both super important to up your paddling game. We talk about the core, we talk about the trunk. We also dive into a great story of Molokai for him and a little bit of a chicken skin moment in talking about a koa canoe, and that's really special, so I want you guys to hear that. Also, talk a little bit about the Salton Sea and how you could help that. It's the largest body of water in California, and we also learned the difference between, this is good, the difference between a Molokai change coach and an accountant. I'll let that sink in. Anyway, you guys are going to love this episode. I really encourage you to listen to it all the way to the end because every single minute has something of really good value. And again, this is by paddlers for paddlers. So I want you guys to share this with a paddle friend. And do me a favor, write into me, right? And tell me who you want to have on here in this kind of form, in this interview format, and we'll get them on here for you. And I'm super excited to do that. So without a further ado, I bring to you the amazing interview in the Paddle Shack with me and Clark and Mr. Chris Hill. I hope you guys enjoy. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us again here at the Paddler's Pulse. My name is Greg, and I'm with my buddy Clark.
Hey everybody.
And we are hanging out in the Paddle Shack today and had a good friend of ours stop by, Mr. Chris Hill.
Hey Chris, welcome buddy.
How's it, guys?
And we wanted to just grab a chance to learn a little bit more about him. Clark and I have known him for a while. He's got some great stories, wonderful insight into paddling. He is without a doubt a paddle everything kind of guy. So Chris, hi and welcome.
Thanks guys. No, it's great to be here. I've been watching from afar kind of what you guys have started doing, and I know we've had some chats about it, so excited to be able to stop by and just talk paddling.
Paddling.
Yeah, we've known you for a little while.
Yeah, about a minute.
I just want to say really quick, a lot of what we've built everything on is kind of inspired by Chris.
It's true.
I had no idea how much fun paddling different craft would be until I started paddling with him at Paddle Society. He would do these great workouts, incorporate every craft possible. Everybody was welcome. Great lung burning workouts, and then at the end of it, you're just stoked, even though you're exhausted. Good energy, good vibe, and it kind of really got me excited about just getting out of the house and paddling more and trying new things, paddling with new people. So Chris, personally, thank you. It's really, really appreciate what you've done for the paddle community.
No, man, that's my pleasure. But honestly, that whole thing is more selfish than anything else, because it was a way for me to have to go out and train on a regular basis. So as great as you made that sound, I know the real reason, and that was just to give me the opportunity to get out and get pushed by some people that enjoyed paddling as much as I did.
I love that. That actually makes me want to ask, how on earth did paddling find you?
So I had moved to San Diego in 2002, and I was working at one of the local gyms in La Jolla, and my manager at the time had just moved back from Hawaii, and she literally just would not stop talking about this whole paddling thing. Like, just would not shut up about it, just all the time.
So that's like a trait of a paddler.
No,
like, we're loudmouths everywhere we go.
Obsessive. You gotta try this. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's the greatest thing ever. And that's literally what I went through. So finally, I conceded, and I decided that, all right,
smart. I'm
gonna go. And then I was just envisioning, I was having these great visions of how I would be able to tell her afterwards, yeah, I tried it, just wasn't for me.
It sucked.
So now I don't have to listen to your stories anymore, and you can stop showing me pictures of people I don't know participating in a sport I've never heard of. So it was great. It was like, all right, I'm going to do this thing so I can get all this behind me. But the real joke was on me, because very first practice I went to, and we're talking about 6-man outrigger practice, very first practice I went to, I was hooked. And at the time, my ego told me that this is a sport I could be really good at, right?
It's good confidence.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And that happens quite a bit.
I've had that.
And for years afterwards, paddling basically became my life, right? It took up...
You drank the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah.
Drank the Kool-Aid.
100%, right? So was wearing my sneakers and my sweatpants and the whole 9 yards waiting for the comet. It took up, it really did. It took up the majority of my time, right? So it was all my free time, all my internet browsing, all of my vacation time, any travel schedule, you name it. It was everything was centered around paddling.
Yeah, you're in.
So just dropped about anything else, and everything, my whole world was paddling. So spent probably the next 14 years, so 10 of those next 14 years just really focused on paddling, and paddling almost every day.
So at this point, you're OC6. You're pretty.
So my very first intro was OC6, right?
Okay.
And that was kind of like the gateway drug, so to speak.
Yeah,
right? So
for a lot of people.
That was the first one's free, but the next one's going to cost you.
Love
and
it.
it does, right? Because because then your next step is to buy yourself an OC1 or now it would be a stand up or a surf ski or whatever the case may be. So that launched the addiction. So started with the OC6. Eventually migrated into getting an OC1 and kind of went through from there. And really at the peak of my obsession, I was doing 2-a-days. Okay. It was and Clarke and I share a running background. So
hey, I happen to be in on that too.
All right, so we all
yeah.
So I didn't mean to exclude you. That wasn't
No. We talked a little bit about that, and I was like, oh, I'm a fellow runner. Like, I feel like I'm among my people now.
Yeah. So for me, it fell very much in line with those old running days, and I'm sure you guys were of a similar mind, kind of the old Lydiard progression where you just put in miles. Right?
Yep.
Put in miles all the time, right? Monday through Friday practices, 2-a-day. Saturday was your long mileage.
Yep.
Sunday was your quote recovery run.
right. But you still did something.
Yeah. So that's what paddling became to me, right? So it was just like falling into old bad habits, right? It's perfect.
It's perfect.
But it's funny though, I'd said earlier, my ego had said this is something I would be good at. The more that you paddle, right? So the more time that you spend open to it, involved in it, paying attention to it, and putting in those miles, the more that you kind of realize that you're not that great at it, right? The less good you become, the more time you spend. It's counterintuitive. You think you'll get better at something. It's incredible. It's a lot like that old martial arts mantra where you get the black belt and it fades back to white. And right?
Exactly.
It's that same kind
I've heard that.
Same kind of concept. So it's been a journey. Obviously, I don't spend nearly as much time as I did when I was fully obsessed with it. Had some reality checks along the way and reinvested in some of the other areas of my life. But paddling has been really, really good to me. It's given me the opportunity to literally travel the world. Met really great people. So had a lot of fun with it. Had some really, really great experiences. And to be honest with you, the cool thing about paddling, to go back to what you said, what has kept you with it throughout the years is that it gives you that opportunity to interact with nature in a very intimate way that most people will never experience, right? So there's whales, there's dolphins, sea lions. I've been interacting with huge mola, right? You're looking at crazy conditions, eerie, just horror scene falls, right? Gale force winds, and even some of the dumber choices like going out for full moon paddles, right? Or surfing and red tide, that kind of thing. Just having those experiences is just something that the average person will miss out on, right? Unless you're out there in the ocean and you're putting in that time. The likelihood of you coming across those events is very minimal.
And the median is so different because it's not going back to running. It's not like running where everybody can have that experience. What you're talking about is using a craft to be in a completely different space.
I mean, it's an environment that's foreign to us, right? If you dropped us in the middle of the ocean, there are a few heroes out there, Coast Guard, lifeguards, swimmers and stuff. But if you just literally got dropped in the middle of the ocean, no land in sight, the chances of you surviving are minimal, right? If you got dropped in the middle of anywhere on land, you could probably walk or run your way home, right? So I mean, it's definitely a big deal, and I think that's another thing that has attracted me to paddling, right? It gives you those opportunities to fail. So I've always been a strong advocate kind of that need to regularly test yourself. So it just better prepares you for life in general, right? So paddling's definitely provided those opportunities. So whether it be races, channel crossings, Clarke's come along with me, and I know that he's a big fan of like the long solo hate missions, where you're just going up and down the coast.
Clarke is a major advocate of the long solo hate missions.
I don't know why I like those so much, but I do. And Chris and I have talked about how you just it's kind of a runner's mentality, but it's just a paddler's mentality where you have to start converse with yourself a little bit out in the middle of nowhere, and there's no one to talk to or hear you but yourself. And you have some,
I've seen it. I've seen you afterwards. It cracks a certain part of your psyche. And it lets light in.
And that's for me is that's always been a pursuit for me. I've always believed strongly in putting yourself in positions where there is that opportunity for failure, where you really have to what I like to call is avoid the quit, right? So you put yourself into that dark hole intentionally.
I've heard you say that before. Tell me more about avoid the quit.
In
fact, I've read some cool stuff that you talk about that.
So for me, I mean, really what that boils down to is it's a matter of being prepared for the things that you can't prepare for, right? So we all know that life is tough, and we all know that the athletic pursuits that we engage in are should be more than just athletic pursuits, right? They should be a preparation for life, right? Or a celebration of life, right? All the above. And so I've always kind of used athletic endeavors as a way to make the rest of life seem easier. And as you said, be able to come in contact with your true self, right? So not the role that you play on a day-to-day basis, not that persona that you like to throw out there to the rest of the world, but in those deep, dark moments, you really get to look at who you are, right? And that's just the basest you, right? That worst case scenario, great word, raw. That's who you are. Right? So, and that's one of the things is, with the conditions that we're exposed to in paddling, and you mentioned it yourself, not always the safest, definitely not always the smartest, but it does provide a lot of those opportunities.
So what I gotta ask, what's the gnarliest,
what is it?
Most raw paddle adventure you've taken on, or just did it even start that way and just became that way because of weather conditions? I mean, you tell me.
And that can go several different ways, right? Because what we're really looking at is that mental, emotional aspect of it, right? So that can come from gnarly conditions, or it can come from just pushing yourself beyond what you thought certain limits were. There are a few years, the holiday burn-off. So Clarke has participated with me a few times in an annual event where my good friend Donovan Jones actually started it. And it started, and a lot of people don't realize this, as kind of a celebration of his life. He was going through some pretty major health concerns. And so he decided, hey, I'm going to do this paddle, right? This is going to be me preparing for an upcoming surgery, right? I don't know how this thing's going to shake itself out, but I'm going to paddle from Oceanside down to Mission Bay, and I'm going to do this thing solo. And that's kind of how it started. So
sweet.
The following year, I went with him and have been going with him every year since, with the one exception I missed because I came down with a flu the day before. It was just out of commission. But the probably two of the gnarliest was the very first time he and I ever did it. It was just us, right? And you've seen it in years where it's been up to like 20 people, right? But
sweet.
It used to just, for years and years, it was just he and I. The very first time I did it, I wasn't prepared for that mileage. I'd never really paddled anything that way.
What is the mileage?
It's over 30 miles. It's
Oh,
like
solid. Wow.
From Oceanside to Mission Bay is like 36, 38 maybe,
Sweet,
something
yeah.
around there. Depending on whether you have to go out around the kelp or not, right? So all those things are kind
Well,
of.
and as you get tired, you start weaving.
Yeah.
You start seeing turtles
So you
and
definitely,
mermaids.
your turtles and mermaids, you're adding
definitely
mileage.
tack on some miles. And just, you're putting your head down and you're going.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first experiences I had where it was just you go past the point physically that you're used to, and I've experienced that same type of thing in different channel crossings. But to get back to your point, Clark, the gnarliest conditions would be one year we did it, and it was just dumb. It was just dumb to go out. It was gale force winds. It was huge conditions. It was absolutely stupid.
Ignored the small craft advisory.
Yeah, and we went out and we actually had one guy break his
so
boat
be there
apart.
with you guys. That's
Yeah,
not so much fun.
we had one
You
guy
would.
break his boat apart. We kind of had to rescue him and take him. We had to turn around and come back with him. At that point, the group got separated. They had no idea that Donovan and I were
you guys
taking
came
him back. So they kept charging ahead.
How big was the group?
It was 6 of us.
Okay.
I hope, because
still
that's
pretty
the
small
only-
group.
It's the only faces I can envision right now. So I hope we didn't lose somebody else. They had to actually put in at La Jolla Shores.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't think they would make it to the jetty, even make it to the jetty.
Oh, wow.
Let
And
alone
that's-
if the jetty was closing out, they didn't think they would get in, so they went in at La Jolla Shores. One guy busted up his boat there.
Wow.
Another guy had to get rescue swum back in.
Swimmed.
Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
So those opportunities, right, are kind of the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Now I chase those same opportunities just a little smarter.
Yeah.
So those are probably some of the things you've probably seen, me talk about before, heard me talk about before, where I just try to set up days where I do things that aren't that difficult, but in the aggregate, they add up.
Right.
So I kind of still try to chase those lessons, but doing it, now I'm a little smarter. All right. Well, now I'm a little older.
Wiser?
I won't even say wiser, because that's definitely the ego kicking in again.
Yeah.
But definitely I've learned some lessons that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about when we have these moments where we push the extreme, right? Crack open the psyche. I like to think of it as a wedge. You're putting a wedge between your previous capable self and your potential capable self. And I love that because it cracks open your psyche. And I'm glad you shared that story. That's awesome. You do this, Clark, very often, actually. You're probably put the wedge out.
Huh.
Yeah, like really push your limits. It's always been inspiring to watch.
Thanks, man. It's
and participate.
I just sit around thinking about it, so finally I have to follow through on it.
Yeah, enough times looking at a Google map.
That's right.
And you're like,
when you print
I'm
out
gonna
the
go from here to
coastline 20
there.
times, so you have to paddle the coastline. Someone's gonna call you out on it.
Yeah.
But
That's awesome.
One thing I love about paddling is you cross that threshold your very first day. I remember my first paddle, and I was completely overwhelmed by the distance, and it couldn't have been more than 4 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
I was exhausted. I was breathing heavy. I swore I could never walk or paddle again, and that was such an entry-level effort compared to what all of us do now.
Yeah.
But at that time, it felt like such an amazing accomplishment, and it just inspired the next one and the next one. It's not one of those sports where you hit a threshold and then just goes downhill. It starts immediately. You get that stoke, and then you just keep raising the bar.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a neat thing. You can get that early on, that cool experience of pushing yourself mentally and physically through paddling.
So, Chris, you mentioned through that story, you mentioned a lot of like touch points in Southern California, San Diego to be exact. Tell me a little bit about your perspective of just California paddling since you got here. Like some of the things that you know about it and some of the things that have changed or shaped or whatever.
Yeah.
Because you've seen a lot of the intricate pieces on both the inside and outside. You're
I would say yes and no, right? So obviously, my answer is going to be skewed,
Sure.
by my, by not only my opinion, but also my experiences, right? So a lot of those happen, as you said, very specifically here in San Diego. And that's probably where I'd be more comfortable talking about. You know, I can talk about kind of what I've seen happen here in good old Mission Bay, right? Which definitely my stomping grounds. I could close my eyes and know where I am.
Yeah, I love it.
And then if folks want to just kind of take that very specific data and extrapolate that over Southern California, well, I'll leave that to them, right?
Good point. Yeah, well said. So tell me about Mission Bay. What have you seen?
Well, when I first was introduced to Outrigger, like I said, back in 2002, that was my main focus, like we talked about. So there were folks that were paddling OC1s and surf skis, but owning a personal craft wasn't nearly as prevalent as it seems to be now.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there were folks that, and you're going to find this crazy, and there may still be one or two kooks around, but there were folks that would adamantly argue that paddling OC1 or paddling surf ski was not directly applicable to OC6. And if you wanted to be a good OC6 paddler, you only paddled OC6, which we now look back on that, and that's obviously it's lunacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not really a thing. Paddling makes you better at paddling. So regardless of kind of what craft you're doing, and in fact, the opportunity to go on a solo craft, right, gives you that chance to really focus on some of the technical aspects, really start to engage with your environment, learn currents, learn how to surf,
absolutely.
learn what affect the wind is, without the distraction of all the other people on the boat, right?
Right.
Or the guilt of messing up their
or the guilt.
Exactly. Well put.
Yeah,
absolutely well put.
Yeah, I remember the first time I did a 5-10 mile OC1 paddle and realized that changeovers are my responsibility.
Right.
Like timing is my responsibility, steering is my responsibility, and you realize that there are far more parts to the whole than you thought was possible before.
Right.
Yeah.
And every time you wanted to be like, oh, that's steersman.
Right.
You now realize
you're the steersman.
Man, they had to deal with all this.
Right. Or could I get more power? Oh wait, I'm the power.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. So during that time frame, mentioning kind of the individual crafts, there weren't that many sources for personal boats, right? In San Diego, it was a little difficult. I mean, of course, there was Judith Hookey, if you were looking for outriggers and surf skis.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure Chris Barlow was connected with Epic at that time. Chris O'Keefe had the original Ocean Ohana.
Oh, okay.
And he was kind of your source for everything outrigger connection, which we know unfortunately is not putting out OC1s like they were before. And anything that came out of Mike Giblin's shop, so that was kind of like the Hurricanes, the Pegasus, that line of boat. I think that Danny had started working with Johnny Puakea and was probably cruising around on a Kaimana at that point. So it was pre the various different ventures. There.
Timeline that for me real quick,
So that's probably pre 2005.
Okay.
Right? So it's like 2002, 2003, 2004, kind of that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is speculative. I don't know if anybody's written the comprehensive history of what boats Danny has paddled over the years, but I think that probably hits it. But what was cool at that time, and kind of what I miss now is that because of that, you got to know everybody that owned a personal craft then, right? So you knew every single OC1 that was on Mission Bay or was in the San Diego area. In fact, it got to the point where you would recognize people from a distance, right?
Oh, wow.
with barely a silhouette and maybe a hint of color,
right?
Because you would know their stroke and you would know what color boat they had, and you would know, and there was just only a handful, right? So you kind of knew what those boats were.
Cool.
So it definitely had that really tight knit community feel, and I don't know that that's been lost, but now I'll go out and I'll see just tons of people on the water, and I'll have no idea who these people are. Never seen them before, never met them before, don't know who they are. Which is great. It's a great sign for the sport.
I would say,
but you kind of miss, having
the intimacy
around
of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You and I were talking about how the history of the canoe gets passed from person to person to person, and how you'll sometimes see a canoe on the water and be like, "That's my old canoe."
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or that's so and so's canoe. And in fact, you and I were talking at a workout a couple weeks ago, and I said, "Yeah, I saw so and so's canoe," and they said it was his before they saw it previously, and they're like, "Well, you know who had the canoe before him was me." I'm like, "What?" And so you see a canoe on the water, and you recognize it also because it's one of those craft that we upgrade and then we kick off to the next person who's entry level. And
and it's great. And what's really cool about that, the kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit trail here, is that with those boats, it doesn't matter how old they are, 10 years old, 12 years old, whatever the model is, they may not be the fastest model. To that person where it's their first boat, it's just as special to them as it was insane to you when you got it 10 years ago. It's kind of an incredible thing.
I remember my OC1 I found from a friend of a friend who mentioned it, and I called this guy up and he's like, "Oh yeah," and it's literally in the rafters of his shop, covered in dust. And I'm like, "When was the last time that I saw water?" And I was pumped and I have no idea who it belonged to before, but it clearly wasn't being used for a long time.
I'm sure there's quite a few of those that are they're hiding here, there, and everywhere.
But it's awesome. Yeah, you're right. When it's your first, it's like this is me. This is badass.
One question I want to ask is you spend some time off the water, doing a lot of things with your body as far as like gym workouts and land workouts. In fact, you've done some drills at paddle workouts I've gone to where you alternate. We'll do water, land, water, land. Boy, do those hurt. And I'm still sore from 2 years ago. I think from a couple. But
I love it.
I'm fascinated, like what goes into choosing what land workouts to complement the paddling workout. And I think a lot of people listening are probably wondering, like, well, I can't get on the water today. What are some great things I can do to complement those dry days?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some stuff that I'm assuming there's a set of muscle groups that get fired more often than not when paddling. How do you support them?
Well, and it's not
without,
just, and obviously, and I think that's a great way to put it, but it's more than just muscles or muscle groups themselves, right? It's also the actual movement patterns, right? So, and the order of recruitment and all those things. But what I find the most is that there's a saying that I use regardless of what athletic endeavor I'm working in: strong trunk, strong tree, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of times we tend to overlook the simple things, right? So that's basically anything between the rib cage to the pelvis, right? And how important that power center is, right? A lot of folks in the fitness industry use that core.
The core,
right?
yeah.
Throw that out there. Hashtag the core, right?
Hashtag core. Hashtag trunk. Hashtag.
Yeah. So a big one for me is getting people to be able to be aware of that. So I'll pick specifically movements that are going to make you hyper aware of where your pelvis sits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're all, and the terrible thing is now, as I know people can't see this, we're all sitting in chairs, right? Which is awful. But the majority of the craft we paddle are sitting as well.
Yeah,
so you got to learn how to be able to engage your trunk, to be able to keep your spine safe, keep your pelvis under you where it belongs, so you don't have that anterior pelvic.
I think every one of us is shifting right now.
Yeah.
I'm so self-conscious.
I caught myself doing pelvic somethings just now to try to center it and not spill the juice out the front. That's not right.
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah. But on that point, it goes with everything that I've learned, running even, right?
100%.
Keep martial arts to every, I mean, there's a key component in all of that.
Yeah,
like you said, anything active.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way in which you transfer force. You transfer it through that trunk. So if there are any kind of leaks or chinks in the armor, right, all that power is going to leak out there. So from a performance standpoint, you're going to lose all that effort. So that tremendous amount of effort that you're putting in there, you're immediately going to lose it. But then at the same time, you're opening yourself for a myriad of injury potentially. So think of it like a Coke can, right? So you got a Coke can, it's a cylinder. If you sit that thing on a table, you could put a cinder block on top of that and a ton of weights on top of that, and that Coke can is going to sit there no problem. Now let's take that same Coke can, dent in one side with your thumbs. Now put that cinder block and that weight on, and that thing's just going to explode. Right?
Yeah.
And that's you if you're not sitting properly or you're not standing properly. You don't have your pelvis under, you don't have your trunk engaged, right? You are going to spill all the juice out.
Spill all the juice or the Coke. Yeah.
That can
great analogy.
Totally painted a good picture.
Yeah, I'm sure I stole that from somebody.
Yeah, but still, it's
Credit
good.
to somebody.
Credit to whoever
Appreciate
the
their
Coke
efforts.
can. Yeah, I love it. Something. I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to fitness related stuff. How did that come about for you? Is that just random curiosity, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. It's, and I wouldn't say wealth of knowledge, right? I know what I know. I'm not any better than the examples that we learned earlier. But I've always been driven by athletic pursuit, right? Because it's always been a vehicle for me to be able to, as you say, really drive the wedge in, right? That self-discovery. So I've always used it in that way, shape, or form. And I've always just been really in awe of the body from a mechanical standpoint.
Oh, it's amazing.
Such an amazing machine.
Oh yeah,
right?
totally.
It's absolutely incredible. So those kind of two pursuits have always really driven me to and I've just had it. I don't get bored talking about it. I don't get bored reading about it. Listening to
Geeking out
lectures. Yeah, I think geeking out would be appropriate. Hashtag geeking out.
Hashtag geeking out. Why are we hashtagging everything? I'm with you on that point. Like, it's less for me. It's more about like on a cellular level. I'm super into the nutritional aspect, all the way down to the mitochondrial level. But I'm fascinated to hear more like functional body movement talk.
Yeah.
Because it so applies to paddling.
So, well, I mean, to everyday living.
So you've just been a geek about it.
Yeah, 100%.
That's pretty much, okay,
that's
cool.
probably the best descriptor period.
And so like me, if you get me in the right position, I will go on and on about calorie consumption and like food-based nutrition, like whatever. because I geek out on it too.
Yeah.
And if you get you in the right position, you just go on and on about
Oh yeah.
body.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, right. So that's awesome. That's great.
I like ice cream.
Clarke
I could go on and on.
Clarke likes to poke fun at me by just eating donuts and staring me down.
It's not to my benefit though.
No,
and
it's
you
not.
know what? Sometimes it takes an injury, which I've had some bad injury problems the last year, to really pay attention to the tree, the trunk, the posture, how I sit at a desk, how I stand. And there was a time I was doing a trade show, and Chris came up to me and said, "Hey, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna kind of adjust you slightly so you can look like a human again." Because over the course of a day, my posture had gone from probably poor to begin with to absolutely caving in and collapsing on myself.
I remember that.
And it was so he did a couple tweaks, and next thing I knew, I felt like a human again. But it's funny, Chris, you've said some things to me over the years that have stuck with me. That's one of them. About just awareness of your posture, whether you're in a canoe, whether you're walking, standing at a desk. And sometimes that awareness helps us be better paddlers, helps us just live healthy. So all these things about geeking out about all this stuff, it's on the water and off. It helps us. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it took an injury for me to be so receptive to how important it is. But that's true to life.
Well, so give me a couple quick tips that any Joe or Jane paddler who wanted to help stabilize that core on a regular basis. Simple, not using weights, not needing a whole bunch of stuff. Like, what are a couple things that we can do? We can all do. How do we build a tribe of better paddlers? Cores or not cores, trunks.
And see that I mean, it's tough. I would love to just throw out a bunch of random stuff, and I think that happens a lot.
Sure.
In our current society, especially the way that the fitness industry kind of moves through Instagram and Facebook and how information is presented, it is very much a shotgun approach. People just blast things out there, right? They just say what they say, and it becomes a one size fits all. Which in reality, that's not the case, right? So. There could be things where people have anterior pelvic tilt and whatever I'm saying is going to be very beneficial and helpful. There are going to be other people that have other problems, right, where it may not be. And one of the things, and I hope you don't think I'm picking on you, Clarke, but at one point, with Clarke's injury, he had kind of thrown it out there. Hey, friends,
I remember that well.
Help me out here. What can I do?
What can I do?
Same kind of question. What can I do?
And I had 30 replies.
There's so many people. They had
well-intentioned, but so many.
And that's the thing. And I'm sure in their own specific experiences with whatever discomfort or pain or injuries that they may have, those were probably the perfect responses. But unfortunately, that may not have been the best response for Clarke. And I think that's basically how I replied to. He's like, hey, these are great. Take them with a grain of salt. Seek out help from somebody that's going to be able to do an actual hands-on evaluation first.
Right.
But there are some activities, having gone on that big tirade, that aren't going to be bad for anybody. Something like people can Google this and they'll find it. Dead bugs, right?
Dead bugs.
Great way to activate your trunk, right? To be able to get good overall body awareness. Things like a hollow rock.
Hollow rock, I'm aware of.
You can kind of look at the hollow rock, and if people aren't
real
prepared
quick,
yet,
describe the dead bug.
So the dead bug is you're going to be on your back, so you're in a supine position. You're going to be
supine.
Yes.
Nobody knows that.
So that's front side up.
Front side up. Got it.
That's sunny side up.
Sunny side up.
So
hopefully it's your sunny side up.
You got your eggs sunny side up.
Got it.
You're going to be pulling your belly button in towards the floor. So you're going to be driving it towards the floor. So your entire lumbar spine, so everything between your rib cage and your butt is going to be flat on the ground. So you want no daylight in that space whatsoever.
Got it.
You want to drive that down. Both arms, both legs are going to be sticking straight up. Right?
Straight up.
So ideally, irregardless of, that's not even a real word. Regardless.
Actually, isn't that Red's favorite word?
Yeah. Regardless of like hamstring flexibility or anything else, you want to do your very best to get those legs straight up.
So if you're not great at it, you might be at a V of some sort.
Yeah,
okay.
You may be some type of trapezoidal
but back
form.
flat. Boom.
Back flat is the
Suck
most
to the
important
ground.
thing. Yeah. And then what you'll do is you'll drop alternating arm and leg. So if your left leg is going to the ground, your right arm is going to go to the ground. And then you're going to bring them back together and you're going to reverse. And the idea is that the pacing is relatively slow. You're having to engage. You're also having to fight rotational forces.
Sure.
Right? So you've got that anti-rotation component in there as well. And then there is a neurological aspect to it as well. It sounds simple enough, but even the best athletes I've worked with, the very first time they go and do a dead bug, they're like,
That's hard.
It's off. Like,
Walking
Yeah.
and chewing gum.
yeah, no, it really is. It's like the wrong arm goes,
Mhm.
everything goes at the same time. There's a weird thing that'll happen where the legs and arms, they may be the right one, right? So they'll have the left leg going and the right arm going out and away from the body, but then the other two will drop into each other.
Oh,
right?
interesting.
So they'll do the opposite motion. So
Huh.
all kind of weird stuff happens. So I like that because it works on so many levels.
Right.
So it's a neurological, it's a physical, the whole thing's
That's a
going
good one. Okay, dead bug. And then Hollow Rock.
And then Hollow Rock is it's going to be a similar component. It's where you're really focused on getting the floor. You're laying on the ground, and there's tons of really great videos out there. So if people just Google that,
Sweet.
There's a wealth of knowledge out there.
Okay.
But you're basically just in an attempt to get the floor of your pelvis to face your diaphragm, which it should, right? So if
Okay.
you're thinking about that Coke can analogy, that Coke can would be the space between your diaphragm and the bottom of your pelvis, right?
Got it.
So you want to get that in there. So you learn by that Hollow Rock is you're drawing the front of your rib cage down towards your pelvis, locking that in like there's some type of brackets or bracing holding those points together, and then literally you're gonna rock like the bottom of a rocking horse or a rocking
Right.
chair.
So I'm aware of the Hollow Rock because at our Dragon Boat event, which you participated in, you and I were talking about it. You showed me what it looked like, and I've done it on the regular for 5 minutes, 3 days a week since that.
That's great.
And it has made it like before I couldn't even lower my legs to the ground without like coming up,
Right.
like my upper body. Now I can just do these leg lifts all day long.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I think a big thing there is, and the reason that I like that is it starts to teach people to utilize that anterior core, that anterior
Mhm.
trunk, as opposed to hip flexors.
Right.
Because what begins to happen is from sitting in desks all the time, from flying in airplanes, from driving in cars, right? They become shortened, and then they also become overutilized, right? So because that trunk gets turned off because your glutes, right, aren't functioning as well, you really start to use those for everything.
Yeah.
And then so when people do sit-ups or leg lifts, they tend to use more hip flexors
Correct.
than they do their abdominal walls.
And I felt that running too myself.
Yeah, and
you can
running's
tell when they
running's
get
a-
overdone. Yeah, when they
Running's
get
a
overdone.
big part of that. Instead of pulling with the hamstring, a lot of people will pull the leg up with
yep.
that hip flexor.
Yeah, and then they're like sore and they're weird, and that stretch you were doing earlier is like that.
Mhm.
The flexors. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of technical stuff. Okay, so dead bugs, Hollow Rock. A third one.
A third.
Or if it's
or-
easier, one that's not effective that you see people spend too much
Oh yeah. What's like the one where you
want
want
freedom there.
You want to start throwing rocks and be like, no, you want to run over and tell them to stop.
Honestly, and it's funny. There's no bad movements. There's no bad exercises. They just might not be the right movements or the right exercise for that person in their current structural
Or
state,
being done right. Period. Yeah.
And then if they're done incorrectly, then it's even worse.
Mhm.
But I'll throw out one more. It's not necessarily an exercise, but it's one. Since we were talking so much about the hip flexors, I would definitely encourage people to Google the couch stretch.
Yeah,
Which
that's a great one.
is a great one for kind of getting that pelvis under you, opening up the various hip flexors, opening up the quads. So if you are sitting a lot, it's a great way to combat that, right? So if you're just forced in your day-to-day life, you don't have any ifs, ands, or buts. You can't get a standing desk. You can't kind of change up your routine. You have to be locked into a desk every 15 to 20 minutes or so. Knock out a little bit of a couch stretch. Try to accumulate upwards of 20 minutes total a day.
Mhm. That's another one that I do a lot of.
beneficial, Yeah.
Especially after runs or the day following a longer one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
big time.
totally love that one. Okay, this is awesome. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I know I am.
Have a good time.
Yeah, totally. I want to transition away from technical stuff.
All right,
Is that cool?
Let's
yeah.
do that. Yeah.
Just a little bit away from technical stuff, and let's get into. Chris, what's your favorite paddle race memory?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've been lucky enough to have some
Or a
really
couple.
great experiences. But I probably, if I were to narrow it down to just a couple of them, they probably would both be my most recent Molokai experiences.
Okay.
So one of which
You've done Molokai a couple times.
yeah, a handful of times. Yeah. But probably the most two recent were two of my favorite. I think all of them, are special for.
It's a
for
pretty
reason, right?
incredible
It's a pretty special race.
Yeah. It's on
but-
my bucket list.
Yeah, you've got to do it.
I've only seen it. I've only seen Clarke do it.
I'm gonna prepare you, and Clarke can back me up on this. But my
Okay.
opinion of Molokai is it's not a fun race, right?
Uh-huh.
So people go there thinking it's gonna be this big fun festival
Yeah.
thing, right? And that's not at all what it is.
Mhm.
The conditions, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they always are just terrible.
Okay.
It's a quartering race, right? Regardless of whether
it is.
it's
That's right.
firing or whether it's dead flat, it's always coming off of that back right quarter panel, right? So you never really get the super long rides. You never get help for long, right? You really do have to kind of work your way across that channel.
So how on earth is it your favorite? How is it? How does it? Bring that one in.
Yeah. So the not this most recent time, but the time before last, I had the opportunity to go with just a bunch of good buddies, right? So they were various different clubs at the time, right? So they were all over kind of the San Diego County area, and we got together and we got to go over. And one, it was just nice to spend time with my friends. Yeah. Two, it was nice to race with guys that during the normal score race season I don't get an opportunity to race with. So that was really, really fun. And we, just as we were closing in on Oahu, it wasn't like the greatest conditions, but there were some pretty smoking runs.
Cool.
And we were just linking up, just one right after the next.
Nice.
Just really good runs. The energy was just really, really good, right? So if you were in the canoe, you didn't want to get out of the canoe.
Right.
If you were in the escort boat, you were standing up. You weren't sitting. You were in the escort boat, just like, shouting.
Stoking people. Yeah. Love it.
So just the energy was absolutely ridiculous. It was just super fun, and have really, really fond memories of that. And our change coach was Uncle Agon, who founded Hano Hano. So that was really special, and his nephew Kaika was part of that crew as well, and that was Kaika's first crossing.
Oh, neat.
So they got to share that together.
Oh, that's great.
And indirectly being a part of that was also awesome as well. So that one was super fun. But then the other was the most recent Molokai that I got to do, and that was had the opportunity, very, very rare and special treasure, was to race one of Koa canoes.
Oh, wow.
One of the Kua Foundation, one of Uncle Bobby's canoes across. Absolutely beautiful. It was actually the Ho'ola, which was originally shaped and crafted by Uncle Bobby's father.
Oh, wow.
And then, kind of reshaped and tweaked over the years by Uncle Bobby.
I got goosebumps thinking about the mana in a canoe like that.
He brought that canoe to Catalina Crossing a couple years ago. And displayed it and crossed with it.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Gorgeous canoe.
And it really is like, and I'll be the first one to admit that I am not the biggest on that type of thing. I won't say that the cultural aspect and the symbolism of things get to me very often.
Mm-hmm.
I very much am. Hey, to me, this is an athletic pursuit. This is a sport. That's how I treat it.
Right.
But with those Koa canoes, there is something just very tangible about it. So even if you are a non-believer, once you get around it, let alone race in one, I have chicken skin right now. I mean, it's just that's just what it is. And then beside that, the crew had a really interesting DNA makeup in that.
This was a real kind of international all-star crazy, never met each other. And then there was an addition, there was an adding problem of numbers at the end. I want to hear about that.
So the interesting thing here is that, as you mentioned, we had guys from Germany, from France, from Tonga, from Brazil.
Oh, wow.
We had a couple native Hawaiians.
That's a mashup.
Me, right, which doesn't really fit anything. Just general mutt, right? And none of us had, with the exception, maybe one or two exceptions, had never paddled together, raced together, or even met.
Wow.
And the way this thing all came together was actually through Facebook. And I think you guys are pretty good friends with Tevita, who put this together.
Shout out to Tevita.
Yeah,
Tevita Moce.
Yeah, hashtag Tevita. He was actually putting this whole thing together, and he was just reaching randomly out to folks over Facebook. Hey, there's this thing coming up. I want to put together a crew. We want to do it for the Pua Foundation. I also want to raise, a little bit of awareness for the event that he does, which is the Salton Sea event.
Yeah.
So he's like, would you guys be interested? And of course, when you get presented with an offer like that, you're like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm happy to do it. And it was great
because Chris Hill gets presented with offers like that all the time. He's like, yeah, I can do that.
It was great. And what was really cool for me as well, since you guys are kind of the history buffs, our steersman, which you can understand why Uncle Bobby wanted to make sure there was a steersman that he knew the channel and would take good care of the canoe, was Kalai Handley, which was the last native Hawaiian to win the Molokai Surf Ski Championship.
How cool.
So he was the last native Hawaiian to win that. He's crossed the channel literally like thousands of times. Right?
That's amazing.
So having the opportunity to hang out with all these guys from around the world and get all these unique perspectives and their take on what was outrigger paddling was really cool. And then, getting to sit with Uncle Bobby prior to and learn about the canoes and his history and his family history and everything else was pretty amazing. And then, Kalai, just the experience that he brought to the table was really, really cool. And then he presented me with, if all that wasn't good enough, he presented me with just the most amazing gift, and that he allowed me to steer that canoe across the finish line.
Are you kidding?
So
we were
a few miles off of the finish, and he goes, I was sitting in seat 5, and he goes, "You steer, right?" I was like, "Yeah. I'm why? You need to take a little break when we take over from 5?" He's like, "Nah." I was like, "I don't think I'm gonna finish. I want you to finish. You got this?" I got it. Yeah. So I got to steer a koa canoe across the finish line, which was absolutely amazing. So definitely can check that off the bucket list.
Yeah. Those are 3 of mine. So the channel, koa, and steering a koa. Yeah. 3 of mine right there.
Unreal.
It was pretty.
That's awesome.
Pretty surreal.
Woo. What an honor.
There was one little joke I was kind of alluding to that I want you to share because you brought up Tevita's name. Tell me about the crew and the number that you had there, because I thought it was kind of entertaining how you kind of did the math as everyone was lined up wearing their uniforms, and you added it up, and it was a number that 9-man season usually have 9. Right?
Yeah. So Tevita is for those that don't know him. He has one of the biggest hearts, right?
Absolutely. Incredible man.
But he does not have the biggest math skills. So while he was wheeling and dealing and setting up all these guys and getting them to show up and lining up all, hey, I gotta have backups to backups, and this is international. You never know, somebody's flight might go down.
Yeah, totally.
You don't know what's going on, right? So we get there. He sets up a charter. We all end up over in Molokai together, and we're like, well, we got to take our team picture before everything goes down. We got to talk about the change chart, right? All the standard stuff you do in a 9-man race. And so we put on the uniforms, and we're all standing around and kind of looking to the right, I look to the left, and I thought maybe I'm the one that doesn't have math skills, so I count them up, and I'm not now everyone else is starting to look too. So who's in
Clark's cracking up right now.
Who's in the crew? Well, it's you, him, and so, but who's in the crew? Well, it's you, him, right? And every time we're coming up with, we actually had 12 guys, right?
Wow.
So we had 12 total guys.
So the backups all showed up.
Yeah, everybody was there.
Love it.
So, Tevita, who had his heart set on racing, was like, you know what, that's okay. I'm going to change coach. And then we found homes for the guys as well. But yeah, so note to self, it's good to have alternatives, right? To have those alternates. But before everybody gets on a plane, not only to Hawaii, but then on a second plane
that's hilarious.
To Molokai, you may want to double check who's actually going to be racing the next day. So
man, that's funny.
That's a little footnote. Yeah.
Got it. Good. That's a good story. That's a great story.
Knowing what I know about Tevita, I'm sure he didn't hesitate to give up his seat.
Oh, yeah.
He was one of those guys.
Probably the first to jump in line and change coach.
But that is just too funny and had to be told.
Yeah. Big heart.
1, 2, 3. I'm running out of fingers here, my friend.
But I would not have him do your taxes.
Oh man, that's good stuff. You mentioned an event he's doing. What's that?
And I think you guys have worked with him a little bit in the past. So, and I think it's pretty incredible that he is working to raise general awareness for the Salton Sea, right? Which is, and back me up if you guys have more details on it. But it is one of, if not the largest saltwater.
It's the largest body of water in the state of California. Yeah.
And it is rapidly, right, as we know, unlike the last 2 weeks here in San Diego, statewide drought, right?
Yeah.
So we know that it is rapidly receding. So, and it's one of those things that not a lot of people know about.
It's
so
true.
One of his missions, in fact, his largest mission is to be able to raise general awareness so we can do something about it.
Yeah, and last year they had their first race.
North Shore Extreme.
Yeah, the North Shore Extreme.
Next one's coming up in a week.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So for anyone listening out there, perhaps if you're driving out to Salton Sea for this
race, you
race,
could be listening to this on the way out.
On the way there.
Yeah.
And if you're hearing it and like, maybe I should go out to the Salton Sea,
go.
Shout out and check out that race.
Yeah.
It's cool. And it's an example of what we're trying to do as paddlers is we figure it's kind of a little responsibility to find opportunities for waterways that we care about and find ways to improve on them. I know I think it's pretty cool that Tevita has found the Salton Sea. I'm sure every person has a favorite paddle or beach or something that's special to them. That
Yeah, the resonant frequency being that, you know, our sport is not possible without water, and so we owe it to that to be stewards of it.
Well said.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing some really great stuff, so check them out as well. I had a couple final questions.
Sure.
And then anything that you might want to interject on the way would be fine. I'm curious to know, because you've got such a wealth of knowledge, what's your take on the rise of unlimited canoes?
I think it's about time, to be honest.
Really?
with you.
Okay.
I don't, if I had to sit down and get the old standard sheet where we're talking about pros and cons, I really don't think there's a whole lot of cons.
Okay.
And granted, if we were talking about this a few years ago, this would be a super loaded question.
Sure.
And in fact, depending on where people are listening to this now,
Could be.
Geographically, it still could be.
Yeah.
But here in Southern California, at least we've kind of crossed that bridge already, which is fantastic. As far as the pros, it has definitely reinvigorated the competitive aspect of our sport, right? So there are a lot of guys that kind of started to fade away from the sport and go in different directions, and now that the Unlimiteds are here, they're back, right?
Oh,
so these
cool.
guys and gals are back in there, and it's drawing in people from other sports as well, right? We're seeing that influx from stand-up, etc.
Okay, sweet.
And then for me personally, right, you'd mentioned kind of my love affair with human anatomy and the ability to keep people safe and comfortable. It definitely is a great aid in reducing the risk of injury, right? So over those 400-pound canoes where you're in a higher seat, so the shearing force from having a longer lever arm and having to generate more leverage is drastically reduced by being lower to the water line, and then of course having a lighter canoe to not only move through the water but to pick up and move around as you need to.
Yeah.
So
I think that's where most paddling injuries happened anyway.
I think so, yeah. On the sand for sure, right? So I'm going to pick this up with straight legs in a jerking motion, right?
Oh, so bad. So bad.
Cringing just thinking about the next
Yeah,
time.
exactly. Oh, so bad.
So I think that's huge, and and for me personally, I think that's going to allow folks to stay in the sport a lot longer. Now,
Cool.
Granted, we do have a lot of really great athletes that are in their 60s and their 70s and they're still paddling. But
Yeah.
I don't know that there's as many as there could be, right? There are people that have gotten sidelined along the years, and so I think not only will it keep those of us that aren't there yet in the sport that long, I think it will allow people that have never paddled, that are of a certain age or retirement age, that now they can come out and they can do that without that risk of injury, right? So it's going to be a lot more fun in them. So I think it definitely kind of opens us up even more to that demographic. I think that's a really great push for that age group.
That's cool.
And now that the genie's out of the bottle, right? The Pandora's box is open, so we really kind of expose ourselves to that innovation. So we can just see it only driving us further. And I think where we're going to see a lot of that innovation is less in hull forms, right? Because there's just from racing yachts, right? From those super fast Oracle catamaran yachts.
Right.
Like we kind of know what the super fast shapes are, and they don't vary that drastically from what you see now in the unlimited hulls. But I think where you're going to start to see the advantage is applying even more high tech and lighter composites, right? So they will get even lighter. And then I think ergonomically, right? They're going to be able to tweak in even better how the seats are structured and where the foot bracing is, and how you're going to be able to, A, from a performance standpoint, generate more torque, and then B, as we mentioned, just be able to keep yourself in a safer position longer. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm excited to see how it's progressed so far here in California, here in SoCal. I'm a bit of an old heart.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that I spent a good portion of my life building hot rods and old cars.
Right.
I like to see the recycling of something. So if you have a Malia out there in the state of California, here is my plea: keep it alive, use it, make it beautiful. It'd be cool to see that class come back, even as a wink and a nod to the history of the sport.
And I think they're obviously the tradition has a place, and I think there are some great opportunities to allow that to happen. I think Hawaii has it right. When they do their state sprints and their island sprint championships, they use the Koa canoes, right? So
it's beautiful.
I think that is a great way to go, and I think that's a great home for that particular style of craft and be able to maintain that tradition. Because let's be honest, right? There's nothing really traditional about a 400-pound fiberglass canoe.
Not even close. Not even close.
It provided the opportunity to get a sport that would otherwise have gone completely extinct.
Yeah.
to spread to the masses.
Yeah,
right?
this is true.
And I feel that going in this direction of unlimiteds is probably going to give us a similar opportunity, right? We're going to see that same type of exponential growth with these boats over the heavier boats.
Yeah. It's been interesting to see how other countries shape them.
Yeah.
There's so many different, it's a trip, but I do like the direction it's going. It's kind of fun.
Well, and a cool side note, I think what's a really great example of what you're talking about is, we mentioned Uncle Bobby Pulaque.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, Johnny has been his son Johnny has been the driving force of these unlimited canoes, right?
Yeah.
So to see that dichotomy of
Right.
true
the
Pulaque
homage
Foundation with the Koa canoe and his son doing the unlimited.
It's just amazing.
An amazing dichotomy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
So if they can make it work, I think the rest of us.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how Thanksgiving dinner might be.
Yeah, exactly.
There might be some dialogue here. I'd like to listen to it.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see a race against a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Where they get to put crews. Hey, that's an official notice to put together some crews and do a one-on-one. Sweet, Chris. I'm really pumped that you dropped by to just hang and
It's
share.
been fun.
Yeah, it's been great. A couple quick last thoughts. I want to know. This is probably fun, but what's your favorite after hard paddle grub?
So.
Because we all, right? When you're just aching for it.
Give us the same
Clark's commented before on how he starts to think about half race or half practice. He's like,
it's my happy place.
Yeah, I usually think about a shower personally.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm kind of the same way in that I don't have a standard like, this is my go-to food. Like I'm always going to eat this. Like I crave this every time. But I do have like a habit that I try to keep intact. And the last few races that I've done where I really needed it, it fell apart. But
ritual, baby, ritual.
Yeah, I do.
Ritual.
Have
it's all about.
I do have this ritual where towards the end of the race, where there's a particularly tough crossing or just a super hard long battle or whatever it is I look forward to one, right? I want to toes on the sand. I immediately want to shotgun a Coke, and then immediately following that shotgun, I want to shotgun a beer, right? And it doesn't really matter what the beer is. For whatever reason, Tecate and Bud Light seem to show up all the time.
All right.
But, so I'm not a snob about it. I'll take whatever. But that levels me right out.
Okay.
Whatever was going on, that combo, I'll let you figure out the chemistry. But
yeah, that's some weird chemistry. That's some weird chemistry. Okay, so we all know if you see Chris on the beach after a hard race, bring him a Coke and a beer.
Yep.
Yeah, got it. You have like limited supplies of
know,
Cokes and beers coming at you now. People be throwing them out. Okay, what else? And then after that, that's it?
That's it.
Oh, wow.
That's
there it is. Wow. That's a good one.
Right on.
I'll give that some thought. Okay. Yeah, I'm pumped you came by. Thank you again.
No, it's been fun.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
And do me a favor, will you come back?
I would love to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good.
And think of some people that you've heard some stories from that you want to bring to us because I know you've heard some great stories. We want everyone on the other side of this microphone here.
Hey, make us accountable, by the way. What are some people that you would like to see here?
Well,
on the
even some
Paddler's
people
Pulse?
we briefly talked about today. So
Okay.
I mean, I think it would be absolutely amazing to get Uncle Bobby on here to talk about the cultural significance and the history of boat building.
Okay.
It'd be
that'd be
amazing
fun.
if you could get him and Johnny at the same time.
Yeah.
What just an amazing conversation that would be.
Okay.
Uncle Aegon.
Yes.
Who founded Hano Hano in 1981.
Wow.
And not only did he start the club, but he also for a long time was a surf ski manufacturer. Right?
Oh.
He handcrafted surf skis, both kind of what we see now, the longer open ocean ones, but also kind of those short spec ones that they would use for life-saving events. So he made those as well. So he's got a lot of experience with those types of things. And he's raced all over the place, so like he's got tons of great stories. You're probably gonna want to make that a 3-parter.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Just like you would with the Pulaques, you're probably gonna have to make those multiple parters. But I think that's a great starter right there. Those guys, you want some history. I think you're gonna get some history.
All right.
That's
Thanks
awesome.
for the recommendation. And like Greg said, hold us accountable. So
hold us accountable to that.
Clark, Greg, where are those interviews?
Yeah, the idea behind this is that it's built by paddlers. So if every interview has an introduction to the next one, that's the perfect cycle.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, last question. A race that you haven't done that you're dying to do. What's another bucket list race?
Anything in Australia.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, anything.
Okay, so we'll set up some people that can help receive you on that end.
Yeah, so if
and make that easy.
Together another
crew with 12 people. So Tevita, if you're putting together another crew of 12 people in Australia, Chris wants to be one of the 9. I mean 12. 9. Okay. All right, so that's it. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us at the Paddler's Pulse. This is some really great stuff, and we're excited to have you here. And as always, we will see you on the water.
No, we got to work on that.
We got to work on that. Water. How about Chris? You do it. Take it out.
Yeah, we'll see you on the water.
Perfectly done.
Thanks for dropping by to listen in. You, yes you, are the great people that bring paddling to life. Join us next time, and please don't keep us a secret. Like us on iTunes, share with your buddies, and keep the paddler's pulse pumping. See you on the water.